More with Jim Rea on ProView's 40th anniversary and the future of personal computing. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by MacVoices Live, our weekly live panel discussion of what is going on in the Apple space, as well as the larger tech world, and how it is impacting you. Join us live at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, or whatever time that is wherever you are, at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV, and participate in the chat, or catch the edited and segmented versions of the show on the regular MacVoices channels and feeds. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, this is part two of a two-part conversation with Jim Rea of ProView Software. We started by talking about celebrating the 40th anniversary of ProView Software, and Jim was telling us some stories about the early days of personal computing and how he got started. And we went down a few rabbit holes, and the conversation got a little bit out of control, and it was fun, and so we just decided to split it in two parts and make sure you heard all of it. This time around, Jim talks a little bit about, again, the early days of personal computing, but also how being a developer has changed and evolved and will continue to change and evolve. Let's go back and let Jim do the talking. This is really interesting. And again, I think that a lot of folks that have come to the computers later, and I don't just mean as in age, but just as in younger, but just maybe don't appreciate, how far we've come and the tricks that you had to use in the early days, given what we would now think of as hardware limitations. Now, we don't measure RAM in K,
kilobytes.
We now measure
megabytes.
Yeah, now we measure it in gigs, and
Right,
sometimes
exactly.
some storage are in terabytes. So I'm just always intrigued by exactly how this stuff came to be. And the fact that you did it, and a lot of people did. They just maybe switched companies, or companies crashed and burned, and they came and went. But you guys were the ones that built the industry. You built the foundation for what we use now, and that may not sound profound because, doesn't everybody build on what's come before them? But at the time you guys came along, the mini computers, microcomputers, personal computers, call them whatever tag you want, they were really just coming into existence at that point.
Yeah, it was more building, kind of not from scratch, but much more so than now. And especially if you go back to the 70s, the computers were simple enough that you could understand the whole thing. So, I was able to understand how the hardware worked. I was able to understand, the architecture of, the CPU registers and, how the internals of the operating system worked. That was all you could get your hands around it and actually, deal with the whole thing. Whereas now, everything is so huge and complicated that people have to sort of specialize and I only I make React web apps and I don't know anything about Swift or Python or
and that may be a bias that sometimes comes up when we talk to you about being a developer on MacVoices, that we just assume you're a developer. And so therefore you shouldn't have all the answers from the developer's perspective. And it's just not the case. That, I know Adam Engst wrote the Internet Starter Kit back in the early days, and he's said numerous times that, then you could understand, you could be an expert on the internet because there was only so much going on the internet. Yeah. And then it evolved, and it just got way beyond what any one person can do. So how does that impact you now, Jim? Are you able to keep your, I think your term was keep your hands around Panorama, and obviously you understand it all because you built it, but as far as addressing new needs that may come up or new features that you want to implement? Or do you have to parcel it out to different programmers who might be more versed in a particular aspect of it?
No, it's all me. I, 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 I do the whole thing, and I write the documentation, and I answer the tech support emails. Um, yeah. Um, you know, I in some ways it's um, a big difference now is that we have the internet and we have Google. Uh, um, it would be impossible to program now without using a search engine. Or now some people are, I haven't done this yet, but I'm thinking maybe I'm time to get into it. Some people are using LLMs um, for that stuff. So, you know, I mean, it used to be that you could learn, you learned from books mostly, um, and you could read the book and know the book, and that's just impossible now. And even like, okay, Panorama has a programming language built into it, okay, so that people can take Panorama and they build applications like to run their business, and they customize it, and actually uh, a lot of Panorama now is written in that language itself. So it's I use Panorama as a tool to extend Panorama even further. Um, so Panorama has about 210,000 lines of Objective C code, and then it has about 80,000 lines of code that are written in Panorama's language. That really allows me to sort of force multiply, because I can do stuff much faster in that language for things that can do. So that's one reason why I've been able to do this as one person. But what I was trying to get to at that point was, okay, Panorama has this language, which I wrote, right? And I use it extensively. I've written, close to 100,000 lines of code in it, right? So you think I know that, right? But let me tell you, I am constantly referring to the documentation, which I also wrote, because I don't remember how to do things. So it's like, oh, I got to do this. I need to look it up because there's too much. Even though I wrote it, I cannot memorize all of it. And that's also true for Objective C, and now I'm working on learning Swift. So, whenever I do something new, even in Objective C, I've been doing it, for almost 15 years now. But when I go to do something, the first thing I'll do is, I'll go and look, have I done this before? Find it in my source code. Okay, that's how you do it. But if I'd never done it before, then I have to go look it up. Because you just can't, now you need a framework that how to look things up, and how to understand what you've looked up. So there is a certain amount of, and when you talk about being a developer and having developer answers, I think that's part of, there's a certain, mindset and sort of general, like how to figure things out and how to take a big problem and break it down. And that is universal. It doesn't matter what language you're using or what operating system. There's a general sort of take a big thing, break it down, and then how to, figure out, what is it I need to search for? That's kind of the trick, as it is in many things. And I guess now with LLMs, they call it prompt engineering, right? Which, is something I haven't learned yet. But so, in that regard, before it used to be, well, I got to find the book. So I got to go get that off my bookshelf. And then, hopefully whatever you want, you're flipping through the pages, and then maybe it's not there, or that book is vague. They didn't cover that, or they covered it in an ambiguous way. And then what? You're stuck. Sometimes it would take me months. to figure something out. And also now, you know, you don't just have the manual, you have all these discussion groups. Somebody's probably done whatever you've done. So you just got to like search, find the needle in the haystack where somebody's done it before. But it used to be that, especially I'd say it was the worst was in the 90s. Like in the 80s, things were simple enough that you could just, the book covered everything. Like the original Macintosh, it had these 3-volume set called Inside Mac. You may have heard of. And what I did was I got a hold of copies of that, and I read them. Some of them I read 10 times, and just sort of, I take it to lunch and I eat my pizza, go to the bathroom, reading them, and I really learned it. And it was small enough that you could eventually pretty much learn it. But by the 90s, things were getting more complicated, but we didn't have the internet yet. So it got, really tricky. So it's still like now, that's the trick, is how do you find the answer out there? What's the right question to get the answer? And you have to have a good feel for, what the overall, like having asked, done solved thousands of programming problems, that gives you sort of a framework for how to look.
So do you think that for younger programmers coming up right now, do you think that, well, Google, from what you're saying, Google had to be a boon. Do you think the LLMs are
And
an
YouTube.
equal? Well, and YouTube, yeah. But do you think that the LLMs are an equal boon, or do you think that
I don't
that's
know
going?
yet.
Yeah, I mean, I've read a couple things, and this seems to be an area of contention that
I think it's possible that things could be, it could go the opposite direction. And in some ways, I think, even with Google searches, I mean, the big it's like coming up with a search, but and the big part of that is separating wheat from chaff. There's just like tons and tons and tons of chaff, and so you've got to very quickly like look at a search, go, oh, yeah, that's not what I want. Although sometimes, like the side effects, you go along like, that's not what I want, but that's a really interesting idea. And I'm going to save that because that's a great idea. I'm going to use that over in this other place. Or maybe I'll even just be like, you know what? I'm going to set aside this problem that I'm working on. And, I'm going to switch over and follow this rabbit hole that I just accidentally found while I was searching for another thing. So, but, yeah, there's a lot of chaff, and I worry that, our LLMs going to make that better or worse? And is the output of LLMs going to start getting fed back into both search results and LLM results, so that, we've got garbage coming out, coming back in? And, a lot of people think Google results are not as good as they were 5 or 10 years ago. I'm not sure. Maybe so.
There's so many things. I'd like to think that they're just better tools, and we could degenerate this into an AI debate, and we're not going to do that, because that's just that's almost as bad as politics right now.
Well, I don't like calling it AI either. I prefer calling it LLM.
Well, and you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Because I think AI puts expectations on it that are not what it is. It sort of anthropomorphizes it. Because humans are intelligent, right? And so the idea is, oh, we're going to make something that's like a human, but it's not a human. It's, but it thinks like a human. But these LLMs, that's not what they do. They don't think. And that's not to it's not to say, that they're bad or deprecate them, but just that that's not what they are. So I think it's a bad name because it makes people think about them in a way that's not what they are, and sets up expectations that there's not what's going to, So I just prefer calling them LLMs, although sometimes I forget too.
Well, sometimes they do a pretty good job of imitating, thinking, depending on what. I
But
mean,
that's not what's happening underneath.
right. Oh,
That's the
absolutely.
thing. See, the thing is
Yeah.
that they have no topical knowledge. They don't know. They don't understand what they're talking about. They they are producing results that sometimes makes it seem like they do, but that's not how the result is arrived at, right? And I think it's important to remember that they're not coming up with these answers by solving a problem the way you are. They're coming up with an answer by looking at thousands of answers that people, that they could find before and saying, oh, I can adapt these answers to your question.
You're absolutely right. We all get caught in the AI trap because that's what, the media has dubbed this stuff. Probably we can blame science fiction for some of that because to a lot of people that's
Well,
exactly what it feels like, but it's
it's a
not.
human tendency to anthropomorphize things. Like we looked at a stuffed animal and that makes emotions happen in us, even though it's just some pieces of cloth and whatnot, right? Um, So, we look at this thing and we attribute human attributes to it. That's natural. That's the way humans are wired. Um, but I think we should try to resist that because um, it will be more useful to us if we, are really thinking about what these things really are, rather than um, you know having an expectation that's incorrect. But I don't know. That
Yeah. Before we wrap this up, there was one thing you said that I thought was interesting, and I wanted to follow up a little bit. That you used the term prompt engineering, which is what we're seeing now. It's developing. It's sort of like developing the skills to query Google to get what you want.
yeah.
Now we're querying LLMs to get what we want. How long do you think that's going to last as a skill, as something that you're going to need to develop? Or do you think the LLMs will get so much better that they will be able to take a much rougher prompt or much rougher kind of query and deliver you what you want?
I think that's going to last forever. I mean, forever, so long term, but let's take the example of using a, a prompt to help you write code, right? Well, ultimately what you're saying is, I'm writing up a specification for the code I need, right? And since the prompt can't read your mind, which you may not even know what's in your mind. You have to tell it. So, you have to give it. Imagine there's no LLM. Imagine that you wanted to instruct me how to write a program, right? I mean, that's been something that we've had for that's called management, right? We've had that for 50 years or 60 years, right? Well, management wants a program, so we need to tell a programmer how to do that. Now, is that straightforward? Does that always work out really well? No, it doesn't, right? That the human programmer often does not come up with what the person imagined. In fact, often also usually turns out that the person that imagined it, they really didn't do a very good job of imagining what they didn't really know what they wanted anyway. And people, I've never been done programming consulting, but I've been exposed to a lot of conference sessions and stuff like how to be a consultant and and stuff like that. And they often say, like, the biggest problem is how to get it out of your client what the heck it is they want, right? Because the clients don't know what they want. And well, what is that? That's prompt engineering, right? Except that the target was another human. And we're 60 years in. That is not even close to a fixed known art, right? People are screwing that up left and right all the time, and there's tons of bad software out there to prove it. So why would it suddenly be magically better if we made, a computer was doing it? Garbage in, garbage out. What is a computer program but a really detailed specification of what we want this software to do, right? So, the more detail you get, the closer you get to, like, well, I just write the damn program.
I hadn't thought of managers as being prompt engineers, but it's a great point that look, maybe there's hope for all of us. Maybe that LLMs won't be taking as many jobs. Because they're clearly very good at doing some things. Some things they're good enough, but at the end of the day, trying to get to exactly what you want is going to be just as much of a challenge now as if I were trying to tell you and communicate to you exactly what I want. So
yeah, I think there's investors have a pipe dream that we're going to replace those pesky, expensive humans, and we can just funnel money into this LLM, and it won't go on strike. It won't, it won't need a family leave. It won't want to raise. Won't life be grand? I don't think that's ever going to happen. Now, and that claim has been made before. People claim compilers would do that. And how many no code, things have there been over the decades? Like, this is gonna, you won't need those pesky programmers anymore. Just use this no code solution. Well, what's happened? No, we have more programmers than ever. But, they're also, like, produced incredible wealth and productivity. All these tools are incredible force multipliers. So, you look back at the tools I was using 50 years ago, and, every little thing was like, it was like crawling over glass to, and, now I've got these tools that, if I wanted to make that word processor that I wrote, 45 years ago, and took me a year to write, I could probably write it in 3 weeks now or something like that, right? But the thing is, nobody wants that program anymore, right? That's useless. It's like, hopelessly unfeatured. And what we want is something that's and that's what's going to, I think, continue to happen. So it's not that we're going to get rid of the humans. I don't think we are. I don't think we're anywhere near that. And I think that's part of the thing also with, the whole distinction between LLM and AI. I mean, if you had a real AI, then maybe it could be conscious and have a volition and, decide, I want to do this or that. Now, that sounds scary as hell, but fortunately we're nowhere near, that's not even remotely on the horizon. But, for now, we need humans to decide what the goals are and what the targets are, and to break everything down. And, like, I don't think that's changed. So, we keep building these, tools that make the humans more productive. And that's, look at us now. We're sitting here on opposite ends of the country, talking on this, through this incredible hardware and this incredible software. um, that, 50 years ago, one of us would have had to gotten on a plane to have this conversation. And not only that, but we could have this conversation and, I guess you could have written it down, but that's the only way it could have been shared with anybody else. So, you know, I, circling back to, we had very high dreams back in the 70s and 80s. But what has happened has so far exceeded what anybody imagined. And people had very high imaginations. On the other hand, bad stuff too, spam, social media, all the problems, there's a lot of good parts, but there's a lot of bad parts so in every way it's exceeded our expectations. um but I remember when, just imagining a screen that was flat would be like, oh, think how amazing that would be if I could carry a computer around. That seemed, and I remember early news stories and like, oh, some Japanese company they've made a flat screen and it's that big. Well, if you're on audio, I'm making a 1 by 2 inch square.
Yeah.
About the size of a watch display. And I was like, yeah, that's not big enough. Well, now I'm looking at you on a 32-inch screen. And it wasn't even, very expensive.
Yeah. I think we're going to leave it there. That Jim's message is we still need humans, and the concept that we have exceeded the dreams of so many of those people that built the industry. And what's going to happen in the next 20, 30, 40 years? That we were talking about the anniversary of Macworld to start this, and 40 years from now, somebody's going to be talking about what it was like now, and it's going to seem so primitive that it sort of it boggles the mind.
Maybe.
Well, maybe not. I don't know.
I mean, things go in waves. So I don't know. This doesn't seem to be slowing down yet. There have been various points where people are like, oh, Moore's law is done. Which it does seem to be kind of petering out, but yet we still are, we're still advancing. But
yeah, well, just in our little corner of the world with the Mac, when the M series chips came out, I mean, that was such a radical jump for power on the desk on our desktops. And now I just listened somewhere that Intel is, I guess, starting to catch up a little bit to that, but we don't know what else Apple has in its labs. And naturally, we focus on Apple. But the point is that it seems like there's always somebody that comes up with a new idea that makes it bigger, better, faster, better. So,
well, and I think a lot of that, what's happening now too, is because of the increased connectivity, because people can build on each other's work so much easier, because of the internet, because of YouTube. In the past, somebody would do something and nobody else would know about it. Right? It'll just be, yeah.
Well, and to your point, just what we're doing here, we're collaborating in a completely a way that was borderline unimaginable back then. So, you and I've been here for a little over an hour, and it means I'm going to be able to go right back to work. You're going to be able to go right back to work. There's no plane, hotel, all of that stuff that had to be done. So you can reach out to collaborate with anyone from here to anywhere in the world, one-on-one or one-on-many or many-on-one. It feels like it changes the entire game. But it's because of what people like you and others did back then. So, Jim, thank you. This has been really fun and interesting, and I hope that
I forgot to actually get up to the 40th anniversary thing, but oh well.
Well, maybe we'll get back to that. But listen, I think just looking back really does say something about that, and now you're still here, and
yeah,
I love
I have a
having
whole story about how the software first came out on the Mac, and I flew up and showed it to some people at Apple. But we'll have to save that.
We will save that. Meanwhile, you folks, you can find Jim Tuesday nights, most Tuesday nights, almost every Tuesday night on MacVoices
I've only
Live.
missed 2 or 3 times in 4 years.
Yeah, along with the rest of our panel, where we look at what's going on today. We look at products and services and the trends in tech. And I'm just delighted to have him because he does bring a perspective that maybe you can appreciate now after hearing some of his background, because it's always it's always better from a distance. It's always better to have that perspective that somebody does, to bring it in with the perspective we have with much shorter terms and much different viewpoints. But I do want to make sure, Jim, to let folks know exactly where they can find you, how they can connect with you, and where they can obtain your product.
Well, the website, you go to ProView.com, PROVUE.com. You'll see this image that's behind me. And there's a bunch of information there about Panorama, which is the RAM-based database that I was talking about. And there's a bunch of videos, so you can watch me explain it in great detail and why a RAM-based database is a really cool solution for a lot of people, and how you can use it. And there's also an online forum there where Panorama users gather online and discuss among themselves. So that's probably the best place to find me. I'm also on Mastodon at ProView Jim at techhub.social. So kind of try to find time to get on there sometimes. Sometimes I'm on there a lot, sometimes not so much. But yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing. It's been a real pleasure. And I guess as we record this, I will see you tomorrow night on MacVoices Live.
Yeah, I'm planning on it. All right.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. I hope you've enjoyed this. We spend not enough time probably looking back at where we've come from. We're too busy looking at where we are and where we think we're going. And it's always valuable to maybe do just a little bit of history and hopefully appreciate the work of people like Jim and all the others who made what we're doing right now possible. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.